Today is all about how we express ourselves through love, passion, and sexuality. Today's show is part 2 of a series on modern dating and relationships, focusing on, is marriage as we know it dead? We're continuing our discussion from last time on modern dating and relationships. We discussed what it's like to be single and how dating apps like Tinder affect the dynamic in today's world. And I found a really interesting video on Twitter this week from Modern Marriage called Why Bother with Marriage? I recommend you take 4.5 minutes to watch that before our discussion today. It explained a really interesting angle of why marriage makes sense and how it can be useful to us. It also presented marriage through a very unromantic and utilitarian lens. Basically, it said marriage is self-inflicted prison that provides us with control mechanisms to sustain a mature and healthy long-term monogamous relationship. Do you agree? Stay tuned for Love Life.
Because we want to know where we came from.
Because I love the things that can only be found in Cayman.
Because it's our paradise.
So why should we protect Cayman?
Because if we don't, who will?
Help us protect our legacy. Join the National Trust today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Babe, and this is Love Life. Today we're talking about Is Marriage Dead? It's a part 2 of a series on modern dating and relationships. And I'm welcoming back Todd Hazelwood and Natasha Casebolt. You guys did so great last time, I thought we'd just keep you on.
Perfect.
Great.
So we're going to keep talking about sort of extending this topic into specifically, is marriage dead? And the reason why I wanted to talk about that, I think it's important, especially in my line of work, but just from the modern idea of relationships and if marriage really fits into that and all of the different topics that we spoke about last time. There's this clip, this video clip. It's about 4.5 minutes. If you want to go ahead and look it up. I think it's a really interesting portrayal of what marriage is supposed to be like traditionally. And basically in this video, what they explain is that marriage is a self-imposed prison, which I thought was interesting because they were actually saying it was a good thing because it helps you control your impulses in a way that you're tethered to your partner, to your spouse, so you don't sort of fall prey to those natural human impulses and break the marriage vows. What do you think about that? Does that sound like a good thing to you, or what's your take?
I don't agree with that statement, only because I feel like marriage probably is pretty dead. I don't think people take it as sacred as it used to be. So I believe that even when people are married, they're not going to restrain their sexual impulses or their other desires because they have a wife, girlfriend. To them, it's all the same thing. If they're going to be that kind of person, they're going to be that kind of person. I think back in the day, marriage obviously existed for other reasons than it does today. I think every relationship is probably different. I think a lot of the times marriage is there for financial protection, legalities, that type of thing, protection of assets, that type of stuff, which is a shame. It shouldn't be like that. But if there is no common law marriage or anything like that, there's a little bit of pressure to do that. But I think these days it's not as sacred or valuable or a necessity like it used to be, for sure. Mm-hmm.
I think you used a very interesting term there when you said natural human impulses. Does that mean that marriage is unnatural? Is it man-made? Is it something that we should be doing? These are good questions. It's obviously an institution that's been around for a long time. It means different things to different people. Like Natasha said, centuries ago it could be to bond two families together for power reasons, mm-hmm. And nowadays it's meant to be for love, and some people have a vision of it, and that's what they want their whole lives. But you see a lot of divorce because people get into it and it's not what they had hoped it would be, and it ends up, causing a lot of pain in people's lives.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, we do see that there's a lot of divorce and separations happening, but I still see a lot of marriages happening. Why do you think that is? Like, people are still sort of having this fantasy idea that marriage is a happily ever after, as well as simultaneously to this divorce rate sort of skyrocketing?
I think it's a carry on from past generations. I think everyone was told, this is what you do in life. This is society says you get married, you have kids, you do X, Y, and Z. You can do whatever you want. It's your life, but people are still doing it because it's still something that is being taught to them is what they are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, just these days and age, like you see a lot of families, people who have kids together and are together 30 years and are never married, but they still have a family and they still have a good relationship. And I feel like sometimes this pressure to get married or, it's too much and it's unnecessary. If you can it shouldn't dictate your relationship. If you have a good relationship, you don't need a piece of paper or an agreement to make it official.
It's just a legality at that point.
It's just a legality. Yeah. But, I guess it's just how you're raised, or I think
it's important
times
to
are
some
changing,
people. Yeah, it's important to some people that they want to have this. It's even if it is no different from the day that you were living together in a relationship and you had kids to the next day when you got a piece of paper that says you have the same last name. It may be no different in the relationship, but for some people, internally and in what they want in their lives, it means something. And that's important to a lot of people, and that's probably why people are still doing it.
I do have to say, though, on this island, it does make things kind of difficult to endure a long-term relationship for, per se, an expat and a Caymanian, because we do have this rollover policy, and you can't just continue to live your life. And their answer to everything is get married, and it shouldn't have to be like that. I think that applies a lot of pressure living on this island, for sure, because it definitely restricts you in what you can do or how you can live your life.
I believe that now the law does recognize some domestic partnerships, but I'm not sure in relation to what department or law that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think just socially, domestic partnerships are becoming more visible. I don't know if they're more popular. They might have always been around, but now I think people are, or maybe we're more aware of them. And they can be more successful, and I'm wondering why. And then I'm thinking about that video, and that probably is contrary to what the theory was on this video, but domestic partnerships not having that sort of pressure and still working. Yeah, so I think it's interesting because Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, that domestic partnership, it reminds me of the success that you can have with that relationship. They've been together for so long.
I feel like that maybe sometimes with when you are married, maybe it keeps you guys together because you have that fear that you feel like you can't leave. I feel like maybe if it's just a domestic partnership, you have to work harder because that other person might just leave you. And maybe it keeps everybody super honest rather than
and don't get complacent, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it makes you. I feel like maybe that's actually maybe even more healthy because you have to work at it because it is easy just to turn around and walk away. As we're married, you feel like it's like slapping some cuffs on somebody and being like, you're not going anywhere,
Sure, like the self-imposed prison that
Exactly.
they're talking about. And, not taking it for granted, the relationship, not taking the person for granted, not getting complacent, and really choosing your partner each and every day is something that is so important in long-term relationships and partnerships. And I wish that a lot of married couples would do the same thing. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of people who are married, they don't do the same thing. They don't, wake up each day and look at their partner and appreciate what they have and work at it. They just take it for granted, and they sort of disengage from the whole process, and they continue to live their lives separately.
Yep.
And I think that's usually the demise of the relationship. Even if they stay together, it's not a happy one.
Yeah.
But maybe kids and money and all that sort of stuff keeps them together. But yeah, isn't the whole point of being with someone, finding your happiness and being in love and it adding to your life, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of ticking a box.
And you see a lot of different types of relationships as well. You see people that were married and had kids, and then they can separate and live their own lives with a child that they share, yet they have their own separate lives that they live and maybe move on to better relationships. And the purpose of the previous relationship was to have a kid, and now they've moved on. Yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
And maybe some people do get married to have kids, that they feel like having children requires that marriage.
Yeah.
But you make a good point about locally, like some of the difficulties with different cultures. So Todd, Natasha will just hold that thought and we'll be right back. Stay tuned and don't go away.
You can now make payments at our TV Center location Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. You can still pay your bill at our Governor's Square location, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays. We offer online bill pay with Butterfield, CMB, Scotia, and Royal Bank. You can also set up a direct debit through your bank. For after-hours payments, there's a convenient drop box at TV Center and Governor's Square. And on Cayman Brac, you can pay your bill at CMB or the post office.
Welcome back to Love Life. We were just chatting in the break and you guys made some good points, some interest that you have in gay marriage, that I know there was the protest recently. So if you want to talk about that and how that relates to this, I think that would be important.
I love seeing the progress that we're having here in Cayman, going towards the gay partnerships. Anyways, they've also said that they're not going to recognize, gay marriage, which is okay as long as they're still moving forward with that. It's hard to understand how maybe, if there's a gay Caymanian who wants to continue having a relationship with their partner and maybe who's getting rolled over or, out of a job at a time and can't claim that person as a dependent. It's hard for them to continue having a successful relationship or move on with their lives with those kind of restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, the Leo Raznovich case was a landmark decision in terms of work permits in that sense. But the Premier made a good point that the law specifically says what marriage is and how it's defined here in the Cayman Islands, and that was decided in the Constitution when it was drafted. It's based off of what it says in the Bible, but it also does have several different instances of marriage in the Bible. There's a lot of polygamy in the Bible. There's Deuteronomy says you can marry, or you must marry if a rapist rapes a virgin, they must marry them, but as long as they pay the father 50 shekels.
It's okay.
Those things are kind of glossed over in the Bible, and I think that's a little hypocritical, but it's going to be a struggle to balance what the Constitution says and what the people of these islands want with human rights issues. You as part of the UK, you can't discriminate against people for their sexuality, for example. So you're going to have to balance that, and that's going to be a tough job.
Certainly, it is a very difficult climate right now in regards to the controversy about that. And I think, if we're talking about how successful domestic partnerships and other types of relationships can be, it's at least a silver lining to say that, you don't have to focus on the legality in order to have a happy relationship with someone, but at the same time, it's a human right. And why do some people get it and some people don't? So there's a lot of things involved there. And I think sometimes when I talk to someone in therapy, I have to really help them focus on what they can control. Obviously, you can advocate and stand up, and it's really important to assert yourself, but at some point you have to accept sort of the plot of life. And if there is something that you cannot change, being able to look at a silver lining and really focus on what it is you can change. And I think that's the only way to feel like you have any kind of freedom in this circumstance. So if a homosexual couple, if they come to speak to me, I'm going to really focus on that with them, making sure that they know that if they're happy and they're healthy in their relationship, that's what's most important. And you know what? You can't control what other people think.
Yeah.
So we can only do what's right for us.
Yeah.
And the other side of this is also people who choose to stay single, that they don't actually want to be in any type of relationship. I know you're single, Todd, but do you feel that, you said you would be open to a relationship, but do you see that people are actually choosing to remain single throughout like a majority of their lives or longer than they used to?
Yeah, I think it's less of a taboo for, any person to be single, but women often are looked down upon by society if they're over 30 and they're single, and it's unfair. But like you said, they may be choosing that. Each person has their reasons, but you always have that fear of growing old alone, right? that's something that a lot of people, it's their motivation behind getting into a relationship. So, some people force themselves into something that they may not be happy with for that reason. I don't think you can live life like that. I think you make yourself happy, you do, what brings a smile to your face every day, and let the cards fall where they may.
Yeah, a lot of people do end up forcing things or settling because they want that partnership. But I think you make a good point that it's important to find that happiness and contentment with yourself, really loving yourself and not sort of putting your life on hold in order to find that partner, which I call that the tour guide syndrome. It's like you don't go on trips or you don't do this adventure because you're waiting for that partner to take you there.
Yeah.
But you can do it yourself. And I think it's really invigorating when you realize that you have that opportunity and that freedom, especially as a woman. I think people do sort of assume that after a certain age, all women are looking to settle down and have children. But some people aren't. And sometimes singlehood can be a wonderful thing and you can accomplish a lot. And you see also the very ambitious and successful women who are focused on careers, choosing to stay that way.
Or getting sorted, you want to establish your career or become somebody before you even think about having a family or taking time off for that, or maybe just building or growing who you are. Maybe you're not ready for a relationship and to put all that commitment in, and maybe it takes, being single for years to figure it out.
Yeah, and it probably is difficult as well if you have a relationship maybe to make those compromises, right? So I think a lot of times people end up sacrificing a lot about themselves rather than doing what makes them happy because they're prioritizing the relationship. So, there's pros and cons to each sort of choice, but I think being able to see someone who is single and not sort of judge them or degrade their choice. And some people don't even want children. So I think that's also a right that people have to choose.
Exactly.
Again, to each their own.
Right.
So do you think you want to have kids? We're two women at the table, so to speak.
I grew up always saying I didn't want kids and that I don't want kids, and I would be completely okay with not having children. If something were to happen, who knows? As you get older, obviously, you start to feel like, oh, what a cute baby, as where before it's no interest. But I'm quite happy with being that, couple that travels and, call it the executive couple. People who just travel the world and enjoy life and don't have to hire babysitters or, go home at a certain time because, so it's a choice that everybody has to make. And, life will give you what comes along and you take the punches as they come or, grow and do things. But as I stand, I'm quite perfectly happy being the way that I am right now.
You can make plans for your life, and then life will come along and say, no, that's not what's going to happen.
Exactly.
But I think I grew up always wanting kids, and I've kind of gotten away from that because I have a beautiful niece and two nephews who I adore, and they are fantastic, and we have so much fun together. And then when they start to poop and cry, I can go, here, go back to your mom. I'm done with you now, and I can enjoy the good parts and not have to deal with the rest.
Well, maybe we'll get back to that, Todd, but for right now, we're going to have to take a break, so stay with us on Love Life.
"20 reasons to attend the International College of the Cayman Islands." In 20 seconds.
Job promotion.
Night classes.
Challenging.
Affordable tuition.
Brilliant professors.
Business. Friendly environment.
Accounting.
Finance.
Liberal arts.
Leadership. Broadcasting. Enthusiasm.
Nuclear.
Associate.
Bachelor's.
Internship.
Diversity.
40-year history.
Hey, that's only 19 reasons.
We're internationally accredited.
Yes, cut.
Welcome back to Love Life. I'm Dr. Babe, and I have with me Tash and Todd. We're talking about is marriage dead, basically, and we've kind of had a whole range of different topics today. We can also talk about some more taboo topics. When people are married and they're expressing themselves sexually or they're not, sometimes they can be sort of tempted to break the rules of the relationship and maybe explore other means of sexual gratification. Pornography in particular is a pretty hot topic, although I think it's pretty rampant, right? And it's been around for so long. But people are afraid to talk about it. And a lot of times what I hear about people's opinion is that it's only negative. It can only have a negative influence. Obviously, there is some sexual objectification, and sometimes it goes over to abuse, and that obviously is something that I'm very opposed to. But there are other ways to look at it and other purposes for it. I'm wondering if you guys have an opinion about that.
Well, I think it's very mainstream now. There's a lot of it. Sex is used to sell advertising, and that could be considered pornography. But in terms of the volume of money that goes through that industry, it's obviously something that every person is, not every person, but nearly every person is watching or enjoying, I guess. And then you see things where you've got people that preach against it are getting busted for child pornography and things like that, horrible things that people don't want to talk about it, but they're probably watching it and they're probably, enjoying it. And so it is very taboo, but it's more mainstream, I think, than people think.
So under wraps, kind of like a secret fixation on pornography rather than something more visible, like in other countries, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, sexuality shouldn't be looked down upon, and we've created this huge stigma about when you can have sex and how you can have sex and with who you can have sex and when you can have sex. It shouldn't be like that. It's a human nature thing. It's natural to be sexual, and it's natural to want to have sex. And however you may go about that, or what might get you excited, or what might please you or your partner or anything else, is up to you to decide. It's behind closed doors. And for somebody to say that, watching porn or participating in your own porn or doing whatever is a bad thing, they can do what they want. They should allow everybody else to do what they want. It shouldn't be looked down upon.
As long as you're not hurting anybody else, right? As long as your involvement is not hurting somebody, then it's fine.
Yeah. Right, like child pornography is definitely not just illegal, but it's morally apprehensible.
Or more violent stuff,
right.
Or there's an extremity to it, but there's an extremity to anything. You can go overboard on anything. So there is, in some sense, where that should be obviously monitored, but.
Well, something I do face a lot in the work that I do with couples is this issue of varied sexual desires, right? So stereotypically, this is not always the case, but let's just, for the sake of conversation, say the man has a higher sex drive and the woman has a lower sex drive. It can be in the reverse as well, but in that case, I think when I talk to the couples, it's really important to talk about the myths, talk about the taboos, be able to explore sexuality from the foundation, which is not necessarily about penetration or actual intercourse, but about self-expression and about honesty and about being vulnerable and the sensuality and connection with two human beings or whatever you're into. But for a woman, let's say in this case, who has a low sex drive, she might not be comfortable with that. And I think it's really sad to see someone cut off a whole side of themselves, like that expression of themselves. And being intimate with someone requires that, unless of course they agree to not having that on the table. But typically it's a part of who we are as a human being, and it's very healthy to express that. I don't know if you have any opinions on maybe women who shut down their sexuality completely out of shame. Like, it's not just other people shaming women, but women shaming themselves.
Well, you talk about relationships and meeting the needs of your partner. It isn't just about sex. A man may have more of a sex drive than a woman, and his needs need to be met. But a woman may have a need to go to the movies. The man may not want to go to the movies, but he does it to meet her needs. Mm-hmm. And either one of those other things you could do by yourself, but it's much more enjoyable to have someone there with you.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's women do. I think to go to your other topic about shutting down. I think it's unfortunate that women are shamed into not being able to express themselves sexually and are shut down. I think it's due to external forces most of the time, and not something that comes from within.
It's a lot of fear, a fear about, I think, being judged, a fear about letting go. in being vulnerable, but there's a lot of fears, I think, that begin to break down relationships and just a person in themselves. I know we didn't really get a lot of time to talk about it, but I often hear of people being afraid of, women being afraid of abandonment. That might be a stereotypical gender thing, or men typically having a fear of losing their freedom. But again, this can be in the reverse. It's not a gender issue, but there's also, like now with technology and more of the younger population, it's the fear of missing out, and so not committing to anything. But, you know, I really wanted to thank you both for coming here today. We've really, I think, picked through these topics and given the audience something to think about. And I really want to applaud your bravery. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Yay.
It was so great having Todd and Tash on the show for our two-part series on modern relationships. Did we determine whether marriage is dead? You be the judge. Next time, we'll be talking about how self-discovery changes us. So stay tuned for more brave conversations from our lineup of awesome guests. I'm Dr. Babe, and you can interact with me on social media and tell me what's on your mind. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like me to explore, message me on any of our social media platforms. And thanks for sticking with us on Love Life.